When it comes to the world's smallest countries, people are quick to think of places like Monaco, Vatican City, Liechtenstein, and Singapore. These are some of the most notable of the smaller nations, though the attention surrounding these countries often overshadows some of the lesser known and equally as interesting states. It's a well-known fact that the Vatican is fully within Italy, surrounded on all sides by Rome. But did you know there's another entirely enclave country which exists within Italy's borders, one which claims to be the oldest country on Earth? I introduce to you the Republic of San Marino. San Marino has its origins during the rule of the Roman Empire, with the country being named after St.Marinus, a stonemason from Dalmatia who founded an independently ruled monastic community on Monte Titano in the year 301 CE. Or at least that would be the extent of your knowledge if you skim the first few paragraphs of San Marino's Wikipedia page, which for the record is not entirely inaccurate, but it doesn't tell the full story of this European oddity. To fully understand how the world's oldest constitutional republic came about, we first must understand its history and inception. According to our best historical knowledge as of right now, St. Marinus was born in the year 275 CE in Dalmatia, specifically on the island of Arba, which is known today as Rab. A stonemason by trade, Marinus was also a practicing Christian, which was rather unfortunate for him as the Roman Empire did not look too fondly upon Christians at the time. The empire had a sporadic track record of Christian persecution throughout the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries, and during Marinus' youth the Romans were preparing for their most exhaustive persecution yet. In the year 301, increasing religious pressure in Dalmatia forced Marinus to flee to the city of Rimini in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, where he found work as a stonemason and was soon ordained as a deacon by the Bishop of Rimini. In my time doing research for this video, I came across multiple different stories about how St. Marinus ended up at Monte Titano, the future location of San Marino. One of these stories claims that Marinus was accused by an insane woman of being her estranged husband, which resulted in him fleeing inland to the mountains, while another claims Marinus traveled to Monte Titano and was astonished to find Christians being forced to labor in quarries, so much so that he stayed to comfort them and alleviate their suffering. Realistically, Marinus was most likely ostracized and persecuted for the Christian sermons which he would deliver openly on the street, leading him to seek refuge away from the eye of the critical public and the oppressive government. Regardless of which story you believe, St. Marinus founded a monastery shortly after his arrival to Monte Titano, which housed him and a group of his followers. Being a lifelong bachelor and entirely devoted to the faith, Marinus' reputation grew, attracting more followers to inhabit the peaceful mountain settlement. For years, the monastic people of Monte Titano lived in peace, separated entirely from the Roman Empire, free to practice Christianity as they saw fit. Once the Romans did eventually catch wind of Christians at Monte Titano, the landowner, a woman by the name of Felicissima, was so empathetic to Marinus' cause that she gifted the mountain to him in order to save them from oppressive Roman law. It is at this point, on the 3rd of September in the year 301, that the modern-day Republic of San Marino claims to have been founded, though the real date is somewhat ambiguous and up to personal interpretation, as our modern idea of a country has changed much since the 2nd century. When Monte Titano was initially gifted to St. Marinus, it was done so with independence from both the Roman Empire and formal Christianity. At the time, the borders were most likely very close to the modern-day limits of Città di San Marino, which serves as the capital of San Marino and sits atop Monte Titano. In the year 303, the Roman Emperor Diocletian issued a series of edicts rescinding Christians' legal rights and demanding that they comply with traditional religious Roman practices. This began the Diocletianic persecution, which was the final and most severe of all Roman Christian persecutions. This great push to eradicate Christianity from the Roman Empire led more people to Monte Titano seeking refuge, though only a few years later, in 313, the Roman Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, which allowed and accepted Christian beliefs, paving the way for Christianity to become the official religion of the Roman Empire only a decade later. In his old age, St. Marinus retreated into hermitage, and after a life lived in devotion to God, he died in the winter of 366, with his final words being, "Relinquo vos liberos ab utroque homine," or, "I leave you free of both men," referring to both the Pope and the Roman Emperor. This affirmation of freedom later went on to embolden the people of Marinus' land to continue their independence. After his death, Marinus was canonized as a saint, and due to his devotion, the land was named in his honor, the land of San Marino. Oddly enough, not much is known about the next period of San Marino history, as nothing of note seems to have occurred within the tiny nation despite massive changes outside of their borders. Throughout the fall of the Roman Empire, San Marino remained independent from all foreign influence and proceeded to function properly on its own. Based on a few relics and historical pieces from the time period, historians infer that the community continued to operate peacefully in the mountains under the eye of various bishops and was rather successful in doing so. After the Lombards had invaded and begun their rule of northern Italy, San Marino was made a fief to the Dukes of Spoleto, while still operating as free and independent. In the 10th century, San Marino was officially dubbed a free commune, which under Italian law is a district roughly equivalent in power to a township. Moving into the feudal age, San Marino became a target for the ruling Malatesta family of Rimini, though they were able to use the Malatesta's rivalry with the neighbouring Montefeltro family of Urbino to their advantage, allying with the Urbino for protection. For their size, San Marino did incredibly well defending themselves from outside forces when they had to, mostly due to the fact that fighting from the top of a mountain has a lot of advantages. This unique geographic feature of San Marino allowed them to continue operating independently for hundreds of years, as most attackers would be dissuaded by this veritable fortress of San Marino's Monte Titano. This later changed in 1320 when San Marino was expanded greatly by the addition of Chiesa a town who decided to join of their own volition. San Marino's land consisted of only Monte Titano and Chiesa until the year 1463, when the allied Pope Pius II gave San Marino the towns of Fiorentino, Montegiardino and Serravalle after the defeat of the Duke of Rimini. Later in the same year, the town of Faetano joined the Republic on its own accord, which is the last alteration ever made to San Marino's borders. During this period of history, San Marino also transitioned into a government type which featured two heads of state called captains regents, which is still the name used for the nation's leaders today. The basis for San Marino's modern-day government began with the Statutes of 1600, which laid out the Constitution of San Marino. Despite being drafted in the year 1600, the statutes were not passed into law until 1631, only then officially creating the Republic of San Marino and birthing the demonym Sammarinese. The Papal States annexed the Duchy of Urbino in 1625, which led to San Marino being entirely surrounded by the Pope's influence by the time the statutes went into effect. Thankfully, the Vatican's Holy See quickly confirmed San Marino's independence after the statute's passing. As time went on, the threats that San Marino faced continued to increase, as the newly expanded territory was difficult to defend with the country's limited military assets. They were used to the protection of the natural environment, but were now faced with defending many crop fields, small towns, and wider landscapes. Thankfully, following multiple foreign occupations throughout the 16th century, the Sammarinese had had enough of operating alone, and a treaty of protection was signed with Pope Clement VIII in 1602. This helped the nation to remain independent, though one final military occupation by Cardinal Giulio Alberoni of Ravenna in 1739 took place, lasting for 3.5 months until Pope Clement XII finally paid attention to the Sammarinese people and recognized San Marino's rights, restoring independence to the Republic on the 5th of February 1740. This day also happened to be the feast of St. Agatha, which led to St. Agatha becoming San Marino's patron saint. Later in the same century, the rise of Napoleon served as an imminent threat to the Republic, though San Marino was saved by the friendship between Napoleon and the Sammarinese regent Antonio Onofri. Napoleon respected Onofri and San Marino so much that he vowed to protect the country's independence and even offered to expand their territory, though the Sammarinese government politely declined the latter due to a fear of creating tensions with neighbouring states. Napoleon officially recognized the state in the Treaty of Tolentino in 1797, ensuring San Marino's independence as a term of the Papal States' surrender. After the downfall of Napoleon, San Marino's independence was further assured by the Congress of Vienna in 1815. Later in the 19th century, San Marino did not wish to be swallowed by Italian unification, though it supported the idea and served as a refuge for pro-Italian unification activists who were under attack at the time, including the notable Anita and Giuseppe Garibaldi, who were partially responsible for the creation of the Kingdom of Italy. A funny side note from this era of history is that in 1861, just before the American Civil War, San Marino sent a letter to Abraham Lincoln, which was in, quote, perfect Italian on one side and imperfect but clear English on the other. The letter proposed an alliance between the two nations, and after Lincoln's acceptance he was made an honorary San Marino citizen. His response to the Sammarinese government's offer was that, quote, a government founded on republican principles is capable of being so administered as to be secure and enduring, which has held true up until the modern day. During World War I, San Marino got stuck in a rough spot as they wanted to remain neutral despite Italy's declaration of war on Austria-Hungary in 1915. Italy immediately developed hostility towards the small nation and grew paranoid about their potential harboring of Austrian spies so close to vital Italian cities. Italy attempted to establish a detachment of carabinieri, or military police, into San Marino, though after the Republic did not comply, Italy cut all contact to prevent potential spies from listening in on radio signals or phone calls. Following this, 20 St.Marinus volunteers joined Italian forces, 10 as combatants and 10 as medical corps who operated out of a field hospital. Though this was most likely done in order to ease tensions with the Italians, the Austro-Hungarian government suspended diplomatic relations with San Marino indefinitely. Much like Italy and Germany after the war, San Marino suffered from high unemployment and inflation, which led to a rise in fascist ideology as class warfare was on the horizon. The St.Marinus Fascist Party was founded in 1922, mimicking their Italian counterpart. From 1923 to 1943, the SFP had control over the St.Marinus government, attempting to follow in Mussolini's footsteps. During World War II, San Marino remained neutral despite their fascist government, which remained in power until June of 1944, when the Republic was bombed by the British, who were under the belief that German forces had occupied the country. Though this belief was incorrect initially, shortly after, in September of that same year, the Germans briefly occupied the Republic, but were defeated by the Allied forces in the Battle of San Marino. Unfortunately for the small republic, the fascist government gave way to a communist one, with the world's first democratically elected communist government, a coalition between the St.Marinus Communist Party and the St.Marinus Socialist Party, holding office from 1945 to 1957, when a democratic party was elected into rule. The Unitary Socialist Party, a name later given to this coalition between communist and socialist parties of San Marino, was elected back into office in 1978, though in 1986 a corruption scandal completely shattered the Socialist Party. At this point the Communist Party formed an unlikely coalition with the San Marinese Christian Democratic Party and had members in parliament up until 1992. Since the fall of fascism, San Marino has made leaps and bounds towards the future, passing the Declaration of Citizen Rights in 1978, which is an addition to the Statutes of 1600, as well as joining the Council of Europe in 1988 and the United Nations in 1992. Despite not being an EU member state, in 2000 the Republic switched from using their own currency, the San Marinese lira, to the euro, which is still the official currency today. In 2002, San Marino signed a treaty with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, agreeing to greater financial transparency to combat tax evasion. As such, San Marino is not considered to be a tax haven, at least when compared to other small European states, though it may become one in the future as tax laws become increasingly lax and more foreign companies have set up shop within the tiny nation. A far cry from the governments of the past, today one of San Marino's two regents, Oscar Mine Paolo Rondelli, is the first openly gay head of state in the world. San Marino seems to have this affinity for being the world's first and the world's oldest in many different areas. As San Marino stands today, it's hard to believe that it had its origins 1700 years ago, though it uses this history to its advantage as tourism makes up the vast majority of San Marino's economy, with the remainder mostly being agricultural exports. San Marino's GDP sits at 2.09 billion, putting it 190th in the world, while the GDP per capita is $60,651 US, 27th in the world. Amazingly, San Marino has no external debt and actually has a budget surplus. Now, I know being 190th in the world in terms of GDP may sound a little bit underwhelming, but one must keep in mind that the country is only 23.63 square miles, which is roughly 61 square kilometers, making it the world's fifth smallest country and the second smallest constitutional republic behind Nauru. The country is divided into 9 districts called Castelli after the 9 castles of San Marino. The current capital is the Città di San Marino, which sits atop Monte Titano. Currently, the population of San Marino stands at only 33,600 people, making it the 5th least populous country on Earth. 80% of the country are ethnically St.Marinese, with almost all other inhabitants being Italian in origin except for a small Ukrainian and Romanian population. Likely due to its origins, the country is overwhelmingly Catholic, with 97% of the population adhering to some branch of Catholicism. Though Italian is the official language of San Marino, the St.Marinese Romagnol dialect, or language, depends on who you ask, is used within the Republic, though mostly among the older generations. Whether or not you believe San Marino to be the oldest country in the world, you cannot deny that for a nation of its size and stature, they have surprisingly survived for over 17 centuries, 300 years longer than the total lifespan of the Roman Empire. Throughout history, San Marino has been seen as a safe place where one is shielded from the threats of the outside world, tucked away in the idyllic Apennine mountain range undisturbed. Today, if you go to San Marino and trek up Monte Titano, you may find yourself looking upon the beautiful Italian landscape below and understanding, even if just for a moment, what it felt like to be St. Marinus. Thank you for watching. This is by far my largest video project to date, so likes and subscribes and bell icons and whatnot are greatly appreciated, but also not required. Anywho, that's it for me. Goodbye.